Big changes for the PFL, a big free agent signing, and big fights coming down the line for the UFC's first pay-per-view event of 2025. It's a busy week in MMA. Let's break it all down right here on the RDX Sports Podcast. Welcome everyone, this is the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head. I hope you had a great Christmas, great New Year, and you're ready to get stuck in to a packed year of mixed martial arts. The first pay-per-view event of the UFC's 2025 schedule is upon us. The Intuit Dome in Inglewood, California is going to play host to UFC 311. There was a little bit of doubt for a while whether the event would actually continue to take place in Inglewood, California, given the tragic loss of so many homes in the wildfires that have spread the region, but all is well in terms of the event being able to take place. It's the home of the LA Clippers NBA basketball team. They hosted a game at home just a couple of days ago. All is well. The UFC are on course. Dana White going on the Jim Rome show this week and confirming that the fight will take place. UFC 311 will take place at the scheduled location, Intuit Dome, Inglewood, California. And it's an absolute banger of a fight card. 2 title fights at the top of that fight card. The undisputed lightweight championship of the world is on the line. Islam Makhachev against Arman Tsarukyan. But these two met back in 2019. It was Tsarukyan's first fight in the UFC. And it was a great contest. Tsarukyan coming in completely new, coming in at short notice as well, and giving Makhachev all he could handle over the course of all 15 minutes of their lightweight fight. Islam hadn't made it to championship level at that point. He was just entering that phase in his career where no one really wanted to fight him. I think everybody knew that he would become a champion at that point. It was just a case of when. And Arman Tsarukyan gave him a tougher night as pretty much anybody during that run as he was building his stock as a UFC lightweight contender. Makhachev going on winning that championship belt, and is now looking to set a new record by retaining it for the 4th time. No one has ever done that before. Setting to make history at UFC 311 if he gets the job done. Arman Tsarukyan conceding a lot of height in this fight. Interestingly, has a 2-inch reach advantage, so that'll be interesting and might be crucial, because the one way we have seen Islam Makhachev lose in the octagon is by KO. Let's see how this one goes. Arman Tsarukyan has even been teasing a secret technique. He's got a special move up his sleeve. Will he land it on fight night, on Saturday night? It should be an absolutely fantastic main event. Lightweight title on the line, but that is not the only fight on the card in Inglewood, California. The bantamweight title is on the line in the co-main event. Merab Dvalishvili, who, let's not forget, only won the belt a few months ago, is putting his title on the line against undefeated Russian contender Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar has flown up the bantamweight ranks and has probably only faced one what I'll call legitimate championship contender in that run, and that was Corey Sandhagen. Gave Umar a really tough fight, but that was kind of like the final exam. You get past Corey Sandhagen, you're worthy of a championship fight in that 135-pound division. Okay, he might not have that full body of work in terms of a massive list of contenders that he's knocked off, but anybody who gets past Corey Sandhagen, I think, deserves to have a crack at that bantamweight strap. Merab Dvalishvili was made to go through a murderer's row of contenders before he got his shot, partially because his good friend and training partner Aljamain Sterling was the champion for a large period of that time. But when he got dethroned by Sean O'Malley, Merab moved into top contender position, fought Sugar Sean O'Malley, beat him, and now he has his first title defense this weekend against Umar Nurmagomedov. And it's an interesting one. Very rarely do you see a championship fight where the champion is a big underdog. But that's the case in this co-main event. Merab Dvalishvili, I think last time I checked, was like a plus 300 or maybe even a plus 400 underdog going into this, which is incredibly unusual. Very rarely see that for a championship fight, with the sitting champion being as big of an underdog as Merab is going into this. That's how much People rate Umar Nurmagomedov's chances. Very well-rounded. Comes out of that incredible Eagle fight team led by Khabib Nurmagomedov, obviously Islam Makhachev in the main event, comes out of that team. And actually, first fight of the night, Tagir Ulanbekov, flyweight contender who's moving his way up the 125-pound division. He's also training out of that team. So it's a busy night for Khabib Nurmagomedov, whose influence is all over this particular fight card on Saturday night. They're the two title fights, Makhachev versus Tsarukyan, Dvalishvili versus Nurmagomedov. But this is not a two-fight card, ladies and gentlemen. There is so much quality on this fight card. And the main card is an absolute banger. We've got Yuri Prohaska versus Jamal Hill. In terms of the light heavyweight division, it doesn't get much better than this without having a championship belt attached to it. Two former champions, both of whom never lost their belt inside the cage. Yuri Prohaska won the title against Glover Teixeira, injured his shoulder so badly that he needed to go into surgery, put him out for almost a year. He relinquished the belt. That belt was then vacant. Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill fought for that belt. Jamal won the belt, was then getting ready to face a returning Prohaska, and then played a game of pickup basketball during International Fight Week and ruptured his Achilles tendon. He followed Prohaska's example and relinquished the belt in order to let the division move on. I remember a very emotional video he posted on YouTube to announce the fact that he was letting go of the championship. It's always gutting when you see someone who's worked their way up, win a belt, and then they don't get to enjoy the fruits of that success because immediately they're injured. Immediately they have to go into surgery. They have to go into an extensive rehab program. They don't get the perks and the benefits of being a UFC champion because at that point, they've decided to relinquish the belt for the good of the sport, for the good of the division. Kudos to both men. They are now going to face off. They were going to face off for the title when Hill was the champion. That obviously did not happen. It's now going to happen with potentially a title shot on the line. Both these guys have been in there with the champ, Alex Pereira, and both of these guys have been KO'd by Alex Pereira. So it's a redemption story for both men. They both lost the belt through matters outside of their control, really, both getting injured outside of the cage. They weren't defeated to lose their titles. Now they're looking to work their way back to face the boogeyman, the man who, in their attempts to get back to the top, has knocked the pair of them out cold. They've got to face him again. He is like the final boss, to borrow a term from The Rock. He is, Alex Pereira, the final boss of the light heavyweight division. Prohaska and Hill, both world championship caliber athletes. They will go head to head in a real clash of styles in what should be a lot of fun at 205 pounds. Winner could potentially leapfrog Magomed Ankalaev and maybe sneak in there and get the next shot at Alex Pereira. Ankalaev obviously is right up there. I think his last fight was against like 4th or 5th ranked opposition. This fight here, former champion versus former champion, doesn't get a lot better than that quality-wise in a non-title fight. So the only disappointing thing with this fight, 3 rounds. This would be a great 5-round fight. They might not need 5 rounds. They might not need 3 rounds. But it's that scale of fight, I think. It deserves to be. It's a co-main or main event on any pay-per-view that doesn't have 2 title fights, basically. It's a huge fight for the division. Really looking forward to that. Also on the fight card, a lightweight bout. Beneil Dariush, Renato Moicano, 2 what I would call fringe contenders at 155 pounds. Both of them have incredible fight-ending arsenals at their disposal. Beneil Dariush is legit as they come on the ground, but he also doubles that up with some absolutely thumping punch power as well. Might not be the most polished striker, but if he lands that overhand right on you, it is game over. He is so strong and powerful, but on the mat is where he prefers to get the job done. Coincidentally, Renato Moicano does his best work on the mat as well, whether he's finishing you with ground and pound or he's working his way to a submission. Money Moicano is absolutely brilliant to watch and so much fun in that lightweight division. I want to see him and Paddy Pimblett coaching opposite each other in the Ultimate Fighter, and hopefully that will happen irrespective of what happens in this fight. But I would imagine if he were to lose to Dariush on Saturday, that path would be a much easier one for the UFC to book, because if Moicano wins, he's on a roll. He's going to be wanting to go towards championship contender status. He'll want another big fight outside of someone like Paddy, who is a big fight on paper, but in terms of his stature in the division is lower ranked. So if you want Moicano and Pimlet, I guess you want to be rooting for Beneil Dariush. What I would say, two great guys, two great characters in the sport, very different as well. Dariush is very understated, incredibly classy individual. You don't really hear a lot of trash talk out of him. And then you've got Moicano, who all gas, no brakes, full personality, turned up to 11. Not disrespectful, I don't think. I wouldn't say he was disrespectful. He said some cheeky. He's cheeky rather than disrespectful, is how I would describe Manny Moicano. But he is absolute TV gold whenever there's a camera pointing at him. So really looking forward to that fight. 155 pounds, Beneil Dariush, Renato Moicano. Who wins? We do. This is going to be such a good fight on Saturday night. Main card opener is a banger as well for very different reasons. Kevin Holland and Rainier Derrida at middleweight. Kevin Holland, the trailblazer, can do a little bit of everything, and he can do it all well. He's got good stand-up. He's got decent ground game. He's got solid wrestling. He's got a little bit of everything. Rainier Derrida, to call him a one-trick pony would sound disrespectful, but his knockout punch is his jiu-jitsu. He is just so good on the mat. It's like grappling with an octopus, getting in there with Rainier Derrida. Everybody knows what's coming. Everybody knows what he wants to do. And very few people are able to stop him. It took Anatoly Malakin, a heavyweight, to stop him in one championship because he just bossed the middleweight division, bossed the light heavyweight division, which, don't forget, in one, the middleweight division is 205 pounds. Light heavyweight division, I think it's 220 or 225. They were the divisions that Rainier Derrida was the one championship champion in. And now he's down at 185 pounds. The weight cut went well for him last time. He looked decent against Gerald Meerschaert, fellow grappler. Got the job done in that fight. And now he's in there with Kevin Holland. If he gets past Kevin Holland and he makes it look good, then big things are coming for the Dutch Knight Rainier Derrida after just 2 fights in the UFC middleweight division. If you're Kevin Holland, I mean, like, you are the go-to guy who has to turn back these big names who are coming into the division. They gave him Michael Venom Page at welterweight when MVP came into the UFC. MVP getting the win on that occasion. Now at middleweight, where Kevin's a little bit happier at the weight, he's going to get Rainier Derrida, who's cutting down to 185 pounds and is an absolute problem on the mat. Holland keeps it standing. I think he can light Derrida up like a Christmas tree. But that's if he can keep it standing, because if he gets to the mat, it's like quicksand when you're down there with the Dutch Knight. So that's going to open up the main card, and that is going to be a superb fight to kick off the pay-per-view portion of the card at UFC 311. Just picking out a few fights of interest further down. On the prelims, Jailton Almeida versus Sergey Spivak. Not an A-list fight in terms of the biggest names in the division, but a really important fight for the heavyweight division. Two guys who both are particularly good on the mat. Almeida is his bread and butter, the grappling. You know, the stand-up is really there only as a means to get the fight to the mat. You got Sergey Spivak, who can stand and bang. He's got some power, but again, he does most of his work on the ground. Size could be a real factor in this fight. Spivak is huge for the weight class. Almeida, not quite as big, might have a speed advantage, but it's going to be a case of, can Almeida get Spivak onto his back, and then can he create an opening? If he does, I think he'll get the sub. If Spivak gets on top, then I think he can use that extra size and weight to really wear down Almeida. And when you take Almeida's offensive grappling out of the equation, as we've seen in a couple of previous fights, there hasn't been enough behind it to really get him out of that situation and get him into the win column. So we'll see how he goes. This is a really well-matched bout in the heavyweight division. Almeida versus Spivak. That is in the middle of that preliminary card. Peyton Talbot versus Ronnie Barcelos is on that card. Bogdan Guskov versus Billy Elikana, who stepped in on short notice. Grant Dawson versus Diego Ferreira at lightweight will kick off the early prelims. But UFC 311, a big fight card in in Inglewood, California. But it is really about those two title fights, Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan and Merab Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov. It might be a UFC fight week, but that hasn't stopped the PFL for getting their fair share of the headlines this week, due largely to a couple of big stories that have come out of the PFL this week. Earlier in the week, it was announced that the Bellator brand as such was being mothballed. It was being killed off. The Bellator events are now no more. What were the Bellator Champion Series events are now called the PFL Road to Dubai Champion Series events, which is obviously lovely for a headline writer. You put all that in a headline, you've got not much left. But that notwithstanding, Road to Dubai, a deal they've done with the Dubai Sports Council and the Tourism Board over there. They are the headline sponsor of this Champion Series, which are basically the shows that aren't a part of what was the PFL season, more of which in a minute. These events will feature what currently are the Bellator World Champions. No word yet as to what's happening with those Bellator titles. Are they just going to be rebranded as PFL titles? That's what they should do. It's a common sense thing to do. But we'll see what happens there. They're gradually trying to streamline their product. The one criticism of the PFL has been the basic fragmentation of what they do. Some of the things they do really well, but getting it all to join together, for the dots to join up, is something that they've not quite nailed until now. And I think gradually they're bringing this together. I mentioned it in my last episode, in my sort of hopes and dreams episode for 2025. I wanted to see the PFL bring this all together. And just a few days after, coincidence or not, you be the judge, they then announce these changes. Bellator is now going to be a thing of the past. And the other big announcement that we got this week was the PFL Global season, as we know it, is also a thing of the past. Previously, we had a regular season, which consisted of 2 regular season fights. You earned points based on that. That then got you into the playoffs. And then it was basically a single elimination tournament from that way on. The playoffs were effectively semi-finals, and then you had the divisional finals. But you had strange situations on occasion where you could have fighters who have done well in both fights, but haven't done well enough to progress because they're not won the fights quickly enough. We've had issues with fighters tying and things like this, so on points. So there was all sorts of issues in terms of the format. And the obvious thing, and I mentioned it on the last show that we did, was just do it as a tournament. Do tournaments. Everybody loves tournaments. Everybody understands tournaments. And MMA tournaments are just the best. Like, we haven't seen them for a while. Bellator did them prior to being acquired by the PFL. Obviously, we've seen them in the past. The Pride tournaments are the stuff of legend. If you've got UFC Fight Pass, get on UFC Fight Pass. Look up those Pride Grand Prix tournaments. Some of the most incredible MMA you will ever see. Especially the open weight Grand Prix and just amazing stuff where they held events, set tentpole events through the course of the year, which hosted the different rounds of the tournament, and then they crowned a champion at the end. What the PFL are doing here is they're shortening their season. They're still kind of using the frame of a season, but it's called the PFL World Tournament. And rather than a tournament that lasts for 8 months, which is what we had previously, this is going to last for 5. The first round will take place in April. There's going to be 8 fighters per weight class. There's going to be 8 weight classes. Heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, lightweight, featherweight, and bantamweight for the men's, and women's flyweight for the women's. They are the weight classes, 8 weight classes, 8 fighters per weight class. Those fighters will then be seeded and placed into brackets to determine the opening round matchups. Then we're into a single elimination tournament, March Madness style, win and advance, lose and go home. And we work our way all the way up to the finals, where we will crown a tournament winner, a tournament champion. Now, the season champions used to get $1 million, but from my understanding, it was $1 million less all of the money that they were earning for each fight moving forward. So the idea was, if you win the tournament, you will have earned $1 million over the course of the tournament. For this, it's a little bit different. The winner will get a bonus of $500,000. So you're going to get $500,000 bonus, but that will be on top of the money that you earn competing in the tournament. So whatever your show and win money are, you will get that as you work your way through the tournament. And then at the end, if you win the final, you obviously get your show and win money for that fight, but then you will also get a bonus of $500,000. So it sounds like they're cutting the money in half. They're not really. It's not as drastic as that. It is a slight reduction for sure. It really depends on the fighter who goes through the tournament and what sort of contract they have. But that's the way it's going to work. You're going to get $500,000 as a bonus on top of whatever your negotiated purse is for each fight moving through the competition. That's how it's going to be. 3 stages, as we say. First round will be in April, spread across 3 events. The semi-finals will be in June, again, spread across 3 events. And then the finals will be in August, spread, as you can imagine, across 3 events. And of course, they will form parts of other shows where we'll have showcase fights. We'll have possibly championship fights outside of the tournament. So they're gradually bringing it all together. The fact that the information is coming out in sort of dribs and drabs is a little bit frustrating. It would just be great if they said, bang, here's everything you need to know. You got questions, we'll answer them right here, right now, and just eliminate all doubt. Like, we don't know what's happening with the Bellator titles, for example. We don't know how these fights are going to integrate within the overall calendar for the year. And also, how the fighters from the PFL's Europe, MENA, and soon-to-be-launched Africa leagues make the jump from their domestic league into this. Do they automatically earn a spot in next year's tournament? That's a question that needs to be answered as well. So these are all things that hopefully over time we will get to learn all of this stuff, and the PFL will become a much more streamlined, a much more easy to follow product. In terms of a tournament, undeniably that will make it a much easier thing to follow. But now it's going to be about setting the events in the calendar, having a cadence and having a narrative that runs throughout the year. And we've got these champions. What are we going to do with these champions? How are we going to book these moving forward? That's how the PFL are looking to do this. I'm looking forward to seeing how they get on with it. Over here in the UK, you'll be able to follow it on DAZN. Stateside, I think it's going to be ESPN and ESPN+. That wasn't the only PFL news, though. That was all relatively positive, I would say. I think everything that was just mentioned there is good news for the PFL. This is all positive stuff. One, what I would call a bit of disappointing news, was the parting of the ways of the PFL and arguably one of, if not the best fighter on their roster. Patricio Pitbull was Bellator's greatest fighter. You take a look at everything he's accomplished in the course of his career, I think it's fair to say he is, if he's not number 1, he's definitely top 2 or 3. As far as I can remember, as far as I can make out, he is the best Bellator fighter of all time. Number 1. Incredible, incredible fighter, fighting at both lightweight and featherweight. Even had a go at a championship at bantamweight. That didn't quite work out for him, but this is a guy who has been in the sport for a long time. He's fought the best that Bellator have had to offer, and that includes the likes of Michael Chandler. And he's been in there, and he's been the standard bearer. He has been the bar for Bellator. And when Bellator were acquired by the PFL, I had high hopes for Patricio, because I thought this was a real opportunity for the PFL to really get behind someone who is a pound-for-pound talent. This isn't someone who is just a champion in a rival organisation to the UFC. He is a pound-for-pound talent. If you were ranking the greatest featherweights on the planet, Patricio Pitbull would be in your top 5. And a couple of years ago, he'd have been in your top 3 or top 2, maybe even top 1. He was that good. He's been somewhat inactive over the last few years, hasn't fought as frequently as I'm sure he would have liked. Now, obviously, they've run out of road with him, and he's been very frustrated. He's gone on social media. He's let people know exactly how he feels about the situation, and he's been released. And I understand there's been a little bit of additional clarification was sought to check that it was an unconditional release. There's no matching clauses or anything like that were going to be actioned. He has been unconditionally released as far as my information goes. Now that means that he's free to join the UFC. Do the UFC want him? I'm sure they'd love to have him. Are they prepared to pay him the sort of money that was on his Bellator contract? I'm not so sure about that. That's the thing. I think he's going to need to take a pay cut to join the UFC. But he'll take a pay cut, but he might get 3 fights a year. Did he fight last year? He might have got one in, so he's going to fight more regularly under the UFC banner for sure. And he's in one of the best weight classes in the sport. He has got so many incredible matchups that can be made for him at 145 pounds. And, the three that leap off the page are Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, and the champ, Ilia Topuria. All three of those fights, you put Patricio Pitbull in the blue corner opposite any of those guys, and you have yourself a bona fide banger of a featherweight fight. Whether it's for the BMF title, whether it's for the featherweight title, or whether it's just as a championship eliminator to get a shot at the 145-pound crown, Patricio Pitbull belongs in the UFC featherweight division. And finally, we'll get to answer a few questions that we were thinking just a couple of years ago. How would he do against the UFC's best 45ers? He's available. He wants to join. I think he might even be in Las Vegas right now. Let's see how this goes. I'm excited for Patricio Pitbull. I'm disappointed for how it turned out with the PFL because they had their guy. He could have been their guy. He should have been their guy. And for whatever reason, whether it's contractual or something else, financial, it didn't work out. And that's sad because I think he could have been an absolute superstar for the PFL and someone who tells the world that, hey, we got one of the very best pound-for-pound fighters on the planet under the PFL banner. Instead, they've let him walk for nothing. He's going to walk straight into the UFC and he's going to become a championship contender as soon as he pulls on a pair of gloves. So that's going to be very interesting to see how all that pans out. Also interested to see how this PFL World Tournament pans out. I'm excited for their product. I'm looking forward to it. I'm also super excited for PFL Europe in 2025. That's going to be good. They're keeping the season structure, I believe, for that. But if they open it up to a tournament, maybe you can put more fighters in. So we'll see how all that goes. Hopefully I'll get a chat with Dan Hardy in the not too distant future and we'll share that with you here on the RDX Sports Podcast. But yeah, big things happening with the PFL. Really interesting side story with Patricio Pitbull. How will he get on in the UFC? Let's see if they sign to a contract in the next few days. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about all we've got time for on the RDX Sports Podcast this week. Huge week of MMA, all kicking off with UFC 311. Then we're fully into it. We've got MMA almost every week leading up to the summer. We will bring you coverage on the RDX Sports blog throughout the year. blogs.rdxsports.com will keep you up to date with everything that's going on, whether it be UFC, Brave, Octagon, PFL, PFL Europe, PFL MENA, whoever it is, one championship. We'll cover it all. We'll keep it all on the blog. Follow it there and we'll chat to you about the big talking points right here on the RDX Sports Podcast. We'll try and line up a few interviews as we go as well throughout the year. But don't forget, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and give us a follow across the socials. I'm at Simon Head Sport on all social platforms, and you can get RDX Sports on X, on Instagram, and on Facebook as well. Give them a follow across all the different platforms and be a part of our output over the course of 2025. Have a great weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and I'll speak to you next week.